my co-host Jason Sunkle tonight, and it is NBA Finals time. So we're going to do our NBA Finals preview,
It's the
share
best
some of
time
our
of year,
thoughts.
Mike.
It
NBA
is.
Finals and the end of school.
Yeah, absolutely. You're almost there. I have been there now for a week and a half. So camp season has officially started for me. So
Yeah, but let's remember who starts back the second week of August,
I
and who
understand.
doesn't
Trust
start
me.
till the fourth week of August. So
Yeah, well, I'll be ruining that day when it comes. I'm trying not to think about it. This is one of those rare times. Usually at this time of year, I honestly don't even know when I go back to school because I don't look at it. But the date this year was so stunning that it's seared into my memory. So I won't be able to get it out, I don't think, until I'm back and I've accepted the reality that on August 6th, I'll be sitting back in school. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So I think what we want to do here quick before we preview the finals is just talk about the one news item that's really probably only semi-relevant to
us.
us because we're Cavaliers fans. So we're going to spend a minute or two on the Cavs coaching search, and then the news today that it appears that JJ Redick is going to get the Lakers job. So let's start very briefly with the Cavs and just give me your 30-second take on what the Cavs are doing, what you think they
Here's what I'm
should
gonna say,
do.
Mike. Here's what I'm gonna say. I'm liking that they seem to be taking their time. I just think of when we rehired Mike Brown. I feel like that happened like 1 or 2 days after we fired a guy, and then um, when we hired Byron Scott, I feel like that happened 1 or 2 days after we fired a guy. Now, when we hired Beeline, that was a little out of the blue. I remember I was at the OMLA conference, and I was sitting with a bunch of teachers and staff, and I was like, the Cavs just hired Beeline? What the heck's going on here? I was sitting at the Kalahari, Mike, getting ready for a keynote speech. Anyways, or maybe it was during lunch. I don't know. Regardless, I that one was a little more out of left field, but I feel like everything else has been kind of like I don't feel like that's been a very extensive search. So I'm kind of glad. And everyone I'm pretty much hearing is at least someone, and I like that a lot of them are assistants and not retreads. That's a good thing too. Like I we've talked at length about how getting a retread guy is not good, because they've proven time and time again, i.e. Doc Rivers, i.e. Mike Budenholzer, they are who they are, regardless of their people, regardless of their personnel. They're gonna do the silly things that they do. I like that we have this. If I had a leader in the clubhouse who I would like, I would like the Nori guy. I think he did a great job. I think he's been done a great job in Minnesota. He's been kind of a part of a situation where you got a young team, and he's seen Finch do it, and I know they lost, but that's who I would. I mean, that's who I was saying before they even fired JB Bickerstaff. That I like that guy. So, and what he may very well not be the guy, but he's my leader in the clubhouse. If I was to pick, Kenny Atkinson wouldn't be terrible, right? I mean, he coached Karis LeVert, and he's turned down a bunch of other jobs. And if he's willing to come here, he's a really, really good coach too. Those are probably the two guys that of the crop that I've seen, I wouldn't mind.
So here are the names. So two of them you mentioned. So I think the Cavs coaching search right now falls into, at least what's being reported, it falls into two categories. And the first guy you mentioned, Mike Nori from Minnesota, he falls into the category of assistant coach who's put in his time, who is now ready for their first coaching opportunity, which is always a category that I feel like is where you probably want to go. Because as you
Yeah,
said, we've numerous times talked about our distaste for a retread coach who you already know the guy is mediocre. And I'd rather go for, it was like you mentioned John Beeline. When the Cavs hired John Beeline, I really liked the hire. Now it turned out that it wasn't a good hire and it wasn't a good fit. But I think when you take a chance on a guy, there's always a chance that he can be a really, really good coach versus if you get a retread, you're just getting somebody that you kind of already know who they are
yeah.
and what you're getting. So Mike Nori falls into the assistant looking for their first head coaching job. We are also supposedly going to be interviewing Johnny Bryant, Chris Quinn, and recently David Adelman, son of former Trailblazers head coach Rick Adelman, who is currently a Denver Nuggets assistant. So all four of those candidates fall into that well-liked assistant, somebody that seemingly is ready to step into the chair of the head coach. And you're taking a chance that maybe they're going to be really bad, maybe they're going to be mediocre, but there's also a chance that you could get somebody who's a really good coach. Then the other category that you mentioned when you talked about Kenny Atkinson is a guy who, and I don't think Kenny Atkinson, I would not classify him as a retread. He's a guy
because
who's had
he's always stepped
one
in,
head.
right? He's never has he ever been straight hired in an off season, or has he always been like, I'm gonna be an assistant and I'm gonna step in? Like the
Well,
Nets job was a step in.
when he got
Wasn't
the Nets job, who did he take over for?
Jason Kidd, right?
Did he take you over for Kidd midseason? You might be right. I
Uh,
honestly
I
don't
will
remember.
I will research that really quickly.
All right, I honestly don't remember whether he was a guy who was hired midseason or whether he actually got the job. But the point is, Kenny Atkinson is a guy who's getting his second job. So he's had one head coaching opportunity, and now he has potentially a second one. He took the Hornets job last year and then changed his mind and
All right.
or
Well, he
2
only
years ago
coached
and
six.
stepped back.
Oh, 1920. Oh, that was the shortened season. He was the head coach. But I feel like he coached 62 games. But I feel like he took. Oh yeah. He 2019. He took over after Jacques Vaughn. Or no, Jacques Vaughn took over after. Oh, I'm so
Jacques Vaughn
confused.
was after Atkinson because Jacques Vaughn took over for Steve Nash. So
Well, Jacques Vaughn was this 2019 2020. Yeah, well, Steve Nash was
all right,
before him, Mike.
Steve Nash was before who?
Kenny
No, he was
Atkinson.
not. No, he wasn't. Kenny Atkinson coached the Karis LeVert,
Oh, wait,
Joe
wait. Oh, no,
Harris,
no. I'm
Jarrett
sorry, sorry,
Allen.
sorry. I lied. I lied. I lied. I lied. I lied.
You're confused, man. You're
20
confused.
I was looking at this. I was looking at this incorrectly. I apologize. So he coached a full season in 2016, 2017. Um he took over he coached 2016 to 2020. He lost his job maybe before the bubble because it looks like Jacques Vaughn coached 10 games that season.
There you
So in
go.
the bubble,
Okay,
did he coach like in the bubble there?
I couldn't tell
So
you.
there you go.
Don't
Sorry.
remember. Anyway, nonetheless, the category is coaches who have been a one-time head coach who are going to get potentially their second opportunity. In that category for the Cavs, we have Kenny Atkinson, and we also have James Borrego, who my understanding is he also interviewed for the Lakers job or is going to interview for the Lakers job. Although maybe now that the JJ Redick news is broke, maybe that is over if he hasn't been in to talk to the Lakers yet. So the honest truth is that I would be fine if they hired Kenny Atkinson or Borrego. I don't feel like those guys fit at least my definition of a retread. I think a guy who's getting a second opportunity, oftentimes that's sort of the sweet spot of somebody's already had some head coaching experience, so they kind of know what they're getting into, but maybe they can take the lessons that they learned in their first stint and apply them in their second place. And so I would be okay with both Atkinson and Borrego. And then as far as the assistant coaches go, I don't know that you can know a whole lot about any of them in terms of what their potential is as a head coach. But these are the names when you hear about coaching openings, not just in Cleveland, but anywhere. The names that I read off to you, those four guys are four guys who are frequently mentioned as sort of next man up and getting an opportunity. So it seems like the Cavs, at least however you want to define it, are talking to the quote right people in terms of the job. I don't see any names on this list that if they hired, I would be like, oh no, I can't believe they hired so and so. So if any of those six guys that I mentioned, at least heading into it, I think I would be okay with that. So I'm glad we're not seeing the complete retread, a guy on his fourth or fifth job. I'm glad we're seeing Atkinson and Borrego as sort of the getting their second chance, and then guys who are looking for their first chance. And that seems like the type of guy that we'd want to hire. Now, it still comes back to what's Donovan Mitchell think, and who knows? There's no way for us to know. There's no way for us to know what those conversations look like. There's no way to know what Donovan is saying, not only about the coaching search, but again, his intentions about staying in Cleveland or not staying in Cleveland, signing the extension or not. So we will see, but I'm guessing that the news is going to come down pretty quickly because the Cavs are going to want to have at least the coaching part of it figured out before the draft. And then free agency follows pretty quickly after the draft, which I believe is the 26th of June, if I'm not mistaken. So the Cavs want to have as much in place so that when free agency starts, they want to have a pretty good idea of what Donovan Mitchell is going to do and how he feels about the coach that they've hired. And then they can start to move forward with what's going to be a very big and interesting offseason for the Cleveland Cavaliers. So I don't know if you have any other
Yeah.
thoughts. If not, let's
No,
move on to JJ Redick.
let's go to the. Yeah, I mean, so it's been not a very well kept, secret well kept. There have been rumors last week that JJ had been reaching out to people to be on his staff, to fill out his staff. It seems like it's a inevitable situation. It's going to be an interesting situation having two podcast hosts possibly being on the same team. Although there's speculation that LeBron's just hanging around in the Lakers to help JJ get his job, and then he's leaving, which I don't know. That would be pretty hilarious.
That
But
would be class. That would be classic LeBron. That would be the ultimate LeBron move, which means it's probably going to happen.
I don't know. But it seems like JJ Redick is going to be the coach of the Lakers.
Would you be excited if JJ Redick was going to be the coach of the Cavs?
If I thought it meant LeBron was for sure coming back, then yeah, sure.
Okay, no, let's just say it's JJ Redick. If I read off the list of those 6 guys that I read earlier and JJ Redick was on that list, where would he rank for you in terms of guys you would want on this to be our head coach? I would say he would rank 7th for me. He would be dead last.
See, I don't know. Like, I really think he's been pretty good on the NBA playoff coverage. I think he's been solid.
Fine, man. That's fine. I mean, that's fine, but it's a whole lot different to sit behind a mic and commentate on a game than it is to coach in the NBA. I just think, to me,
listen, I would really look forward to the Doc Rivers versus his games. Come on, after all that stuff that happened, come on, that would be so much fun. It would be so great.
I'm not saying it wouldn't be fun. It would be fun to have JJ Redick as a head coach because if you go by my theory of you're taking a chance on maybe a guy could be good. I mean, he's the ultimate. His category of people is the ultimate. Let's take a chance. Steve Nash was in that same category, right? A guy who played in the league but had never coached, never sat on the bench as an assistant.
He also got really bad hand dealt to him, right?
I know, but I'm just saying. I get it. I get it. That those personalities, we knew that thing was doomed from the moment those guys all joined forces. There was no question. I don't know that anybody could have managed those 3 guys. But nonetheless, I still maintain that if you have not coached at all ever in your life, and suddenly you are now the head coach of an NBA team, there are a lot of things. I mean, just think about our conversations on the podcast. Pretty much everybody we talk to who has been a head coach says, man, when I became a head coach, I had no idea that it was going to be as whatever, and then fill in the blank with how different people have answered that question over the years. I mean, there's a million different things that coaches talk about that are different when you're a head coach. And so not only that, are you talking about a guy who is getting a head coaching position for the first time, but this guy has never put in his time as an assistant. And you think about the 3 or 4 guys that the Cavs are interviewing have been longtime NBA assistants. You think about guys who've been grinding away in the league as assistant coaches, both former players and guys who are just working their way up that have spent years and years and years working at their craft and trying to become better coaches and all those things, just waiting for that opportunity. And obviously JJ Redick has a platform, B, a name. Clearly he's a super smart guy. I don't think there's any doubt that at some point he would be capable of coaching an NBA team, and maybe he's going to be somebody that steps right in and does an amazing job. I think that to step in and coach a LeBron-led team as a first-time head coach with no coaching experience on your resume, and granted, it appears because of their podcast that the 2 of them have a relationship. So obviously that should theoretically help, although it could also end up hurting in some ways where LeBron is, again, not that he hasn't been in other situations, the de facto head coach, but I'm not so sure that it sets up for a winning formula. And so I'm glad that JJ Redick is not a candidate for the Cleveland job. And if he goes to the Lakers, it will be something that will be very interesting to watch and observe how that plays itself out. Because I just don't think somebody goes from I've never coached anywhere in my entire life to I'm suddenly the coach of the most famous team in the NBA and one of the whatever second
Yeah.
best player of all time. I just don't know how I don't know how that goes. If
Are you
it
saying
goes
are you
well,
saying it has Steve Nash written all over it?
no, I'm just saying the odds are against it. The odds are against it working, in my opinion. I just don't
Yep.
see. Again, I think there's a lot that goes into it that JJ Redick hasn't experienced, hasn't gone through, hasn't had to deal with, and hasn't ever seen anybody else deal with it. And suddenly now he's got to be the guy. I just I question whether or not that's a good hire for the Lakers, and I question whether or not that's a good first move for JJ Redick. Even if you're an assistant for a year and just get a feel for kind of what it all entails behind the scenes. And look, like I said, JJ Redick, smart guy, obviously at some point has the capability of probably being a good NBA head coach. I just wouldn't want to be the team to hire him with no experience. Let's put it that way.
All right. Fair enough. All right. So we're going to preview the NBA Finals now, Mike. Let's do it.
Let's
Right?
do it.
You ready? Okay.
Yeah.
So when we recorded last week, we knew that Boston was in. We knew Boston was in. We just had to wait on the result of the Mavericks Wolves. And I believe we recorded after the Wolves won game 4. So
we were slightly optimistic that I don't think we either of us thought that Minnesota was coming back, but we tried to lay out the case for why they could.
And it was a drubbing.
The combination of Luka and Minnesota not showing up proved to be a little bit too much for the Minnesota 3-0 comeback.
What was more of a drubbing? The violence of the WNBA players against Caitlin Clark, or what the Wolves experienced against Dallas? Mike, what do you think?
I'm going to keep my WNBA thoughts to myself. I'll share those with you off camera.
Anyways, so here's what I'm gonna say. The Mavs were just too much. Kyrie and Luka did what they needed to do, and I'm really, really excited for the finals. I think obviously it comes down to Tatum versus Luka, Kyrie versus, not really Brown, but like the guards. What's Porzingis' health look like? Is he going to be able to play extended minutes? This whole like week off situation, because they were talking that he was going to maybe come back against Indiana, and then he didn't end up having to come back. This extra week should theoretically give him lots of time. I think Jason Kidd being the coach of the Dallas Mavericks versus his name's escaping me. The guy who doesn't know what he's doing in Boston. What's his name? Oh, what God?
Second row Joe Mazzulla.
Joe Mazzulla, thank you. Like how long? I mean, Boston hasn't played anyone who's been. And when they have played anyone that like the Cavs competed without Donovan Mitchell for 2 games. Indiana was in all those games even without Tyrese Halliburton playing. Like, they're not going to be able to do that. Now, once again, I want to reiterate the Dallas has to also stop Boston, who they can score a lot too. So, it's just lots of interesting storylines. I think the most interesting storyline is whatever happens, Dallas, you need to kick their butts, because I cannot deal with Celtics winning the championship. That's really the bottom line. I cannot fathom or stomach a Celtics championship. I just can't. I want to see Kyrie do something crazy in Boston and start stomping on the Celtics' face. I want him to do that nonsense. He's gonna hear things that he probably hasn't heard, well, since he was in Boston. But I don't know. Like, there's so many interesting storylines on this, and I think it's teed up to be a good series. It's been very strange to not have any NBA for the last week, but that's where we are. We're excited for Thursday. The storylines are interesting. I definitely think if Dallas wins, Luka's obviously ceiling comes even higher as far as like where he could finish in all-time greats. Because I mean, how old is he? He's 23, right?
25,
25,
25,
25. And we're gonna have the two somewhat out of shape European players in back-to-back seasons win the NBA championship. Is an interesting thing when you've got all these NBA players doing these crazy workouts and things in AAU, and we got Jokic and Doncic smoking their cigars, drinking their beers, partying it up, almost old school Charles Barkley, Michael Jordan style, right? I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting to see that. I'm obviously rooting for Dallas. All right, sorry, I kind of went off a few tangents there, Mike, but go ahead.
All right, so I guess I don't know if we want to let's maybe start, since you brought up the storylines piece of it. Let's maybe start there, and then we can go into more specifics of kind of what we're looking for specifically when each team has the ball. So you mentioned the Kyrie piece. That right there's the changing teams, sort of the it's not necessarily a rivalry between the Mavericks and the Celtics, but there is like these little individual connections between the two teams. So you have the Kyrie in Boston, where that season was, by any stretch of the imagination, was at least a semi disaster in terms of how it played itself out for Kyrie in Boston. He spent that season, after a lot of games, at press conferences talking about the young guys, and the young guys don't get it. And obviously at that point he's talking about Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And there was a lot of pushback at that time. And clearly I'm not sure how excited Tatum and Brown are about Kyrie and that relationship. What I've heard and read is that seems like maybe Jaylen Brown and Kyrie are okay, but I'm not sure how Tatum and Kyrie will feel about. So certainly the Boston crowd is going to have a lot of things to say, and there's going to be a lot of things for Kyrie to hear when he's in Boston. So that will be very interesting. I mean, Kyrie, when he's been right, has proven himself to be a guy who can play under pressure, can play away from home, can play under adverse conditions. Now, he hasn't really been in that position for 6 or 7 years, but the way he's played over the course of these playoffs makes you feel like you're going to get a really good Kyrie performance in these finals. And obviously, if he plays well, that's going to go a long way toward helping Dallas to win the finals. So we will see. You and I talked last week about him being a great number two, and he proved that to be the case with LeBron in 2016, and he's proven that to be the case this year with Luka. Whether or not they go on to win the finals or not, clearly Kyrie has rewritten the history. That when you look back, I think we talked about it last week, you go back 18 months and almost everybody was talking about the fact of who's going to want Kyrie? Why does anybody want to trade for Kyrie? Dallas trades for him. And then why does anybody want to sign Kyrie? How much is Dallas going to
Well,
pay
speaking
Kyrie?
on that, Mike, did you see the report that came out about the Lakers trying to trade for Kyrie
Last year?
when he was still in the Nets? They were going to give him 2 first rounds and Westbrook, and the Nets said no.
I mean, again, understandable in a lot of ways. Look, I mean, the thing with Kyrie, no matter which end of that trade you look at, everybody is looking at Kyrie's talent. And clearly he's had a lot of issues, and he hasn't been nearly the same player on the court over the last 7 years, either due to injury or the weirdness of the things that he's doing. And you can go back and read and listen to whatever you want to read and listen to. There were very, 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 very few people, us included, who thought that Dallas was making some sensational move that was going to take them to the title when they traded for Kyrie. And then when they re-signed him at the end of last season to that 2-year extension, there was almost nobody that thought that those were moves that were going to work out tremendously well. Almost everybody said, we don't want to be in the Kyrie Irving business. I wouldn't bring Kyrie Irving to my team. I think you and I were in agreement that we probably wouldn't have done that. Dallas decided to take a chance, and Kyrie has been everything that Dallas could have possibly hoped for and more. And so if he
Yep.
continues to play as well as he has, then he's going to give the Mavericks an excellent chance to win the NBA Finals. And I mean, at this point, it's already worth it. Everything that Dallas did to get him and to re-sign him, to get to the point where they are now, is it's all been worth it. And nobody saw that coming. So there's that angle. There's the Kyrie part of it. Then you have on a smaller scale, right? Porzingis was in Dallas with Luka. It didn't really work out for a myriad of reasons. Porzingis wasn't ready to be the player that he is now in terms of being able to punish double teams and take littler guys into the post. When he was in Dallas, that was very ineffective for him. And last year in Washington, and then continuing on to Boston this year, he's been one of the most efficient post-up players on mismatches in the entire league. So I don't know that the amount of ire in Dallas for Porzingis is going to be anywhere near the level of vitriol that Kyrie is going to face in Boston. But you do have that piece of it. I don't know if you remember this, but back a long time ago, and we don't have to dwell on it, but when Jason Kidd was accused of some things, domestic violence with his wife, there were some things from the Boston crowd when he was with New Jersey while he was still playing that came
I
out.
remember
And
when
so
he
I don't
I
know that
remember when he
that's
used to kiss the kiss, send the kiss, the whole
so I don't
thing.
know how much of that is going to be brought up. Hopefully that's
I
something
mean,
that
that was
is
like '98, wasn't it?
right.
they,
But still, again, I'm not saying that it's
they
going
are
to come up
Boston.
and be
They're
a big
Boston fans.
there
Come
is
on, let's
going to
be
be
honest.
there's going to be some mention of that at some point. So we'll just leave that there. But those are kind of the three sort of lingering stories around the connections between the two teams. That's definitely a storyline. I think the next storyline that we're going to hear a lot about is the comparison between the best players on the two teams. It's clear going into the finals that, and you and I have talked about this many, many times, that when we think about the tier one superstars, guys who are good enough to lift their team to an NBA championship, I think us and everyone else includes Luka Doncic in that category of player who is good enough to be the 1A on a championship team. And then on the other side, we've talked about Jason Tatum a lot and whether or not we think that he is at that level. I know we've come to the consensus that he is a tier below that. I think when you look at the course of these two players and their playoff performance, clearly, look, Tatum has played, I don't know how many playoff games, 80 playoff games already in his young career. He's going to play a lot of playoff games by the time he's finished. And he's probably averaging somewhere around, I don't know, 25, 10, and 5 or 4, whatever it might be. So he's the leading playoff scorer, I think, in history in his first whatever number of seasons. So he's clearly a guy that is right there near the top, but you and I feel like
Uh,
there's just he's not
Mike,
at
Luca
that level. Yeah.
stats, Luca stats in 45 playoff games: 31, 9.5, 8.2 assists.
Yeah. Look, I mean, those are as good a stats as anybody that you want to stack them up against when you start talking about going across the board. So Luka is he's a level above Tatum. As good as Tatum is, he is a level above Jason Tatum. I know that pretty much every game in this finals, I'm going to pencil Luka in for the stat line that you just read off. And he's not going to vary from that hardly at all. Whereas Tatum, he could have a huge night, but he could also have a night where he's nowhere near that level of production. And I think that's what ultimately separates the very, very best guys from the guys who are players number 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in the league. They just don't perform at the highest level with the same amount of consistency as your Jokic, Luka, I think right now Giannis, and a lot of people are including SGA as that fourth guy. I think to me it's Luka, Jokic, Giannis are kind of at the top, but and then you go to that second tier. So I think that's going to be something that is
Is
going to be a
LeBron in
talking
your
point.
second tier, Mike?
I mean, at this point, he's in the second tier. I mean, he wasn't
Well,
obviously in the
I was
second
just
tier.
asking to see if he was still in the second tier or if you would drop him. I mean, you got it right because he's 27-7-7 still. Like,
Look, if
or 20.
LeBron is your best player, the question is, I mean, part of the discussion around this series is most often, and not that it happens every single time, but most often you can boil down a series to which team has the best player. And if you boil
Didn't
this
we talk about
series,
talked about this a few weeks ago, right? And I think we said, I mean, when was it? It had 2011 Mavericks over the
right?
Heat. That
Yeah,
has to be it, right?
right. I mean, now you can look at this playoffs and say that Minnesota beat Denver. Clearly, look, Edwards was great in the first 5 games of that series. He wasn't as good in games 6 and 7. Jokic was the best player in that series, and Denver lost. So, is it possible that the team with the best player loses? Sure, it's possible. But over the course of NBA history, most of the stats and most of what we've seen is going to tell us that the team with the best player is going to win. So, if that's the case, that means Dallas. And I think that both these two players have an opportunity to, I don't want to say rewrite their legacy, because Luka is obviously in the process of still, I think he's writing it. And if Tatum ends up being the NBA Finals MVP, and then you pile that on top of 6 Eastern Conference Finals in his first 8 seasons, and just the counting stats of what he's done in the playoffs, the number of playoff games that he's played. Now, look, I don't think Tatum vaults to that next level, but maybe he does. Maybe this is the NBA Finals. I don't expect it to happen, but maybe this is the finals where he takes that final leap and becomes that guy. I don't expect it to happen. I'd be shocked if it happens. I think if Boston wins, I think it's more of a collective team effort than Tatum suddenly puts the Celtics on his back. But even if the Celtics, through a team effort, win the finals, I think it starts to color Jason Tatum's career in a different way. Versus if they lose this, having got a cakewalk to the finals and having won 64 regular season games and having had a top 5 all-time point differential, then you start to have another conversation of, are these guys always the bridesmaid, never the bride, and can they get it done in the final moments? I don't know. Where do you stand on the Luka Tatum argument,
Oh,
and
it's not
kind of
even
where you're thinking
close.
going into the
It's not
series?
even
Yeah, no,
close.
I agree. Right.
It's not even close, Mike. I mean, I get that the Celtics, is this their third year in the finals in a row, right?
No, they were not in the finals last
No.
year
Oh, it was
because
2
they
years.
lost to
Sorry.
the Heat. Remember, they were
Yeah.
down
But
3-0, came
but
back,
2 years
and
ago.
then
So this is their second time in 3 years, correct? Correct.
yes,
Because they
yes,
lost the Warriors.
yes.
So listen, I'm really looking for, God, this is, if the Mavericks win this series, I'm really looking forward to we've got to blow up the Celtics talk again. We like it's gonna happen. And I think it will happen this time if they don't win it. I think
they
so.
split? You think
I
they
think
split Brown and Tatum?
I think they do. I think they have to, because if they don't win this year, when they literally had the cakewalk of cakewalks to the finals, and they're playing the 4 seed, right? They're playing the 4 seed,
the
5
seed.
seed. They're playing the 5 seed in the
seed.
West, and I know the 5 seed in the West was still better than any team that they played in the Eastern Conference final or Eastern Conference. But honestly, I'm just, the Cavs are at full strength. They have a chance to win that series. I truly still believe that. I don't say that they are, but they have a chance. I think if Indiana doesn't fumble the 2 games away, they have a chance to win that series against Boston. Whereas the Mavericks, they beat the Nuggets, they beat
OKC and the Clippers.
OKC and the Clippers. And the Clippers I know they weren't quite full strength because of the Kawhi situation, but I mean, OKC was going on full, they're number one seed. They had no one injured, and they played them. I just don't. I don't see how they can rationalize keeping the Celtics together should they lose this series. I just can't understand it. Like bring me so much joy. It'll bring me back to the joy of the 4-year stretch of LeBron just dominating the Toronto Raptors. It would be just like the Celtics losing again. Oh, I hope everything happens. I just really, really do. It would make me so happy. I know I've said that probably 7 or 8 times, but it's just really what I'm thinking. I just can't. If I don't know how I will cope with a Celtics championship because I'm going to be going up to New England the June 30th, and if they will have just won a championship, I'm sure I'm going to see it all over the place, and I don't want to deal with it.
You're going to get your Boston Celtics 2024 World Championship T-shirt when you go up there. I know. I can already tell.
Light it on fire.
Look, I could not agree with you more in my sincere hope that the Boston Celtics fall on their face and do not win the NBA title. I do think that Luka is ready and presumably healthy and playing at a very, very, very high level. I don't know that Tatum or anybody else on the Celtics can match what Luka's going to bring to the table. I do think that Boston has a lot of different ways that they can play that potentially can give the Mavericks trouble. On the other hand, I think the Mavericks, the way they play, some of the things that they do, can also present some challenges to the Celtics. So let's talk a little bit really briefly about how do you think the Celtics, how do they start on the Mavs? Who starts with the defensive assignment on Luka? And then what do you think their initial strategy is going to be coming out when
I think
Luka's running screen roll?
I think Jaylen Brown's. So if I'm the Celtics, I probably have to say Jaylen and Jason Tatum, although they're slightly going to be they have to guard Luka and Kyrie. So if that's the case, then Jason Tatum's going to guard Luka, and Jaylen Brown's going to guard Kyrie to start the game. Because there's no way that Derek White it's going to stop Kyrie. There's no way. I mean, Drew Holiday, I guess Drew Holiday is probably the other option. I guess I kind of forgot about Drew Holiday for a second there. And he's had a great playoff, by the way. They don't, I don't know. I think probably, I guess I'm gonna revamp what I say. Drew Holiday is probably gonna start in Kyrie. I think if I'm Boston, I'm gonna start Jaylen Brown on Luka and keep Jason Tatum away from him and have, if anything, Jason Tatum kind of help situation and then, start the game with Jaylen Brown, and then when the situation arises that you want to switch or whatever, you put Jason Tatum on him for some possessions.
You think they guard Luka? I mean, they're going to throw every different type of coverage at him coming off screen and roll, but how do you think they start?
I think they have to blitz him like they were doing to Mitchell in that game 2, or was it game 3 that they blitzed Mitchell? Because I know he played 1, 2, and 3, right?
Yes.
No, he didn't play in game 3. We went to game 3. He didn't play in game 3.
That's the one. That's the one he sat out. Yeah, he played the first 2.
So we won. We won game
2.
So in game 1 they blitzed him. In game 2 they didn't blitz him as much until the second half. So I think they have to blitz Luka. They didn't really have to worry about that against Indiana, but I think they have to blitz him. Force him to make a pass. If Kyrie beats them, then Kyrie beats them, or someone else beats them. I think they blitz those screen and rolls. They're not gonna let Luka just get free reign. I think they're gonna have to double team him every time. I think that's the strategy.
So I think they're definitely going to show Dallas that look at some point. I think they're going to start out trying to switch everything to not give Luka and Dallas an advantage where they can play 4-on-3. I think the difference between blitzing Donovan Mitchell and blitzing Luka, and yeah, you can get the ball out of his hands, but Luka is so big and is such a great passer that I just feel like even if you put two dudes on him, he's big enough, strong enough, has good enough vision that he's going to put the ball in the right place, and it's going to put Dallas at such an advantage that I feel like if Boston starts out blitzing, that they're going to quickly get out of that. I think more blitzing is going to be something they kind of pick and choose depending on what lineups Dallas has out there. I feel like, and look, I don't know that it's going to work. I mean, there's not really a whole lot that you can throw at Luka that he's not going to be able to diagnose and then dissect. But if I'm Boston, I think I go into it with the idea that I have probably with the exception of if Porzingis is out there, and theoretically, it's not like Luka's beating Porzingis with his quickness, and Porzingis has
Yeah.
size. So if I'm Boston, I'm not more deathly afraid of Luka going against Giroux or Tatum or Porzingis, or let's say Horford's in there. Look, I know Al Horford's old. He doesn't move the way that he used to, but I'm not any more deathly afraid of Al Horford guarding Luka than I am deathly afraid of him going against anybody else. I think I'm just deathly afraid at all points, no matter who's on him. The only guy I think that Luka has a clear, distinct advantage on where you can be like, okay, the Celtics clearly don't want this guy on him. I think that's Derek White, where just from a size, strength standpoint, I think Luka kind of gets wherever he wants to go. And he may get wherever he wants to go against all these guys. So it may all be irrelevant. But if I'm Boston, I think what I'm talking myself into is, hey, we can switch across all 5 positions. And if we can at least not give Luka all the easy passing angles and our team defense and our individual defense, we have enough good individual defenders, and collectively as a group, we're so locked in that maybe we can make it hard for him to score. That's how I think they're going to start. I don't know if that's going to work for any length of time, and clearly they're going to throw in as many different looks as they can. I think they'll probably blitz. I'm not sure that you can really play drop coverage against Luka because then he just gets the guy who's coming around the screen kind of on his back, and then he walks that big down, and then you've got the lobs. And obviously, if Porzingis is in there for Boston, makes a big difference. You got a 7'3" dude that can move the way Porzingis can, much more effective defending those lob passes than Al Horford can be. But I see them starting thinking with the idea that they can switch across all 5 positions and at least not give Luka an advantage coming right out of the screen. I think they're going to try to switch, but I think you're 100% right that they're going to start Jaylen Brown. I think they're going to see blitz coverage. I just think they're probably going to start out just switching the screen and roll and see if they can manage it that way. So that's what I see when Dallas has the ball. Obviously, Luka's going to dissect that and figure it out. And then clearly from Dallas's perspective, and conversely, if Boston is looking at what they're trying to give up, whether or not Derek Jones Jr. and PJ Washington hit threes is going to go a long way to determining what kind of defense Boston decides to play. Because if those guys can knock down between 35 and 40% of their threes, Boston's going to have to think long and hard about where they give help, how they give help, and not leaving those guys. Conversely, if they get off to a rough start and they're shooting below 30% from three, now suddenly Boston has more options of leaving those guys a little bit longer, maybe giving them some threes and selling out more to stop Luka and Kyrie. So those role players to me are huge. And then obviously Lively and Gafford rolling to the rim. If Porzingis is in there, it's a big deterrent compared to if you have to play Al Horford. So that's what I'm looking for when Dallas has the ball. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, and then we can quickly talk about when Boston has the ball.
No, we've already gone past our self-imposed time limit, so we're doing great.
Right.
No, I don't have anything else on the Mavs. I think we pretty much said it. And as far as Boston goes, Mike, what I'm looking for is them not being complacent and actually like playing the game of basketball, because I think at times they get, this always happened when we had LeBron. Like, they would get a game where it just would look like they were checked out and not playing as hard as. But unfortunately, Boston seems to do that every game. and they have a whole quarter that they're just like, oh, are we playing basketball today? That would be like me showing up to my first class every day, being like, or show up to school. Which class do I feel like not teaching today? I'm just going to sit down and not pay any attention and let the kids create anarchy. That sounds like never mind. I was going to, but anyways, I just think like that's what the Celtics, I want to see them not being complacent. I want to see them playing together as a team and not, I felt like terrible possessions was all too common, even in the situations when their team was blowing teams out. You just have Jason Tatum come up the court and take a terrible shot, or dribble the ball around and take a terrible shot. Like, I want to see ball movement. When their ball movement is on point, they are very deadly and they are very good. That's basically what I say. Defensively, they're top notch defensively, but I'm more concerned with their offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think that from a standpoint of Boston possessions, there's so many of them where they'll run some action and that action will break down and they won't get anything. And then the ball will swing to Tatum or to Brown and they'll start jab stepping. And then all of a sudden it'll just break down into one of those guys trying to go one-on-one and either going to a step back three or taking a terrible shot that's forced because the shot clock is running down. You see a lot of possessions from the Celtics where it just seems like there's not really a point to what they're doing, and they quickly abandon it, and all of a sudden there's 10 seconds on the shot clock, and instead of trying to get into a secondary action, they just stand around until somebody takes a shot. And I think that's what you're talking about. And if they do that against Dallas, as good as Dallas's defense has been over the last 8 weeks, they're going to have a really hard time going against this Mavericks defense if that's the way they play. Conversely, as you said, if they move the ball and they get into their secondary actions and they don't just settle, which too often, especially then, this is one of the biggest knocks on Tatum is he settles for a guy as skilled and as big and as strong as he is. He so often settles for terrible jump shots late in the shot clock. That's death against Dallas because Dallas's offense, is going to score. I mean, Boston, as good as Boston's defense is, I think Dallas's offense is going to score. And so I think the key here is, can Boston be as surgical with every possession as Dallas is going to be? Now, I don't think they will be, but can they ratchet that up where they're not having as many meandering possessions over the course of a game or in the course of a quarter?
That was a good use of meandering, Mike. That was a really good use of the word meandering. I just want to give you props for that.
I'm working on my vocabulary. So I think that's the interesting point. Here's my question for you. Who do you think, Luka and Kyrie, who do those guys start out guarding? Where do you put Luka and Kyrie?
I mean, I would put Kyrie on Jrue Holiday because he's not really going to drive to the basket and do too much, right? Like, I mean, he'll try to. I mean, I guess he might try to bully ball him a little bit. But I can't put him on Derek White. I don't think, because I think Derek White will get by. I think Luka starts on Tatum, right? Or I don't. I mean, if he's guarding Jaylen Brown, if it's just going, who's guarding Jason Tatum?
I think probably Derek Jones Jr. or PJ Washington. I think one of those two guys probably gets the Tatum assignment. I would probably go PJ Washington to start. So you put Lively on Porzingis or Horford, whoever's starting there. I think Kyrie.
Lively's cleared, right? Lively's cleared.
Yeah, he should be fine. He should be good to go, man, especially with these 5 days off. So I can't imagine a scenario where he's not fully cleared and ready, as far as I know. So I would start with, if it was me, I guess I'd probably put PJ Washington on Tatum. I'd probably put Derek Jones Jr. on Derek White. And the reason why, and I agree with you, I think Kyrie probably starts on Jrue Holiday. I think there's two reasons why. You could make an argument to flip that, but I think you're right that potentially the Jrue Holiday bully ball and post game against Kyrie could be a problem. But again, if you're Dallas, you're okay with Drew Holiday's probably the fifth best. If Porzingis is playing, he's probably the fifth best offensive player on the Celtics. And so if you're Dallas and you say, hey, you want to reorient your offense to attack Kyrie with Drew Holiday post ups, good, let's go for it. Let's have at it. And then I think the other thing is that if you look over, and I forget the statistics, but I read them somewhere, that Derek White is involved in a huge percentage of Boston screen and roll and Boston offensive actions. Like Derek White is just much more involved in what Boston does offensively. He touches the ball on more possessions. He's the initiator, the creator on way more possessions than Drew Holiday is. So I think Derek Jones Jr. is the better option, bigger, longer, better athlete. You put him on Drew Holiday. I'm sorry, you put him on Derek White to sort of try to break up those actions. I think probably Luka has to start on Jaylen Brown. And look, Luka's never going to be the greatest defensive player, but I go back to sort of the Larry Bird defensive mantra of sure, Larry's not the quickest guy, Luka's not the quickest guy, but they both have incredible basketball minds. They know where to be, they're in the right place, and they're both really, really huge human beings. So if you combine just Luka's sheer size and smarts, and then you think, hey, in the NBA Finals, this guy's going to give as much as he's ever going to give on defense, you'd think that's what he's going to bring to the table. So I think that there are difficult matchups for Dallas sort of all over the court because the Celtics have 5 very good offensive players. I mean, Drew Holiday, he's their 5th option. On a championship team with the Milwaukee Bucks, he was the 2nd option. So Boston is pretty good offensively, which is going to present some problems for Dallas. But again, their defense has been so good, and Lively and Gafford have been so good protecting the rim. And Luka and Kyrie are certainly giving more effort than what they have been known for at various times throughout their career. So it should be, I think, going both ways. It should be very interesting to see how the teams start and then what adjustments are made both as games go along and as the series moves along, and we kind of see, well, what role players are going to do what, and how does the way that these two teams guard each other's stars, how does that impact what goes on the rest of the floor? So I think this is going to be a great series. I think there's a lot of things that are interesting from a strategic standpoint that you can look at. And then you have, obviously, the storylines of just the personalities. You have the Boston Celtics, probably one of the 2 most storied franchises in the history of the league. And then you have Luka, who's, let's face it, he's on a trajectory right now as a 25-year-old. If you look at his statistics and what he's accomplished in terms of first-team All-NBAs and where he is in his career, and if he wins a title this year, you mentioned earlier that his age, he's 25 years old, and if a guy as the best player wins Finals MVP at age 25, he's on the front end of that bell curve of when guys who are all-time greats win titles. And so it's going to be a fun series. I'm right there with you that I will be rooting hard for the Dallas Mavericks, rooting hard against the Boston Celtics. And you want to go ahead and make predictions unless you have anything else to
No, I'm making predictions. I'm going to say Dallas in 6, Mike.
It's funny because my inclination is to say Dallas in 6 too, but it's interesting how little the home court advantage has mattered in this NBA playoffs. The number of road games that have been won, like it seems like, hey, the logical pick is Dallas in 6, right? Because you expect them to close it out at home. And yet there's been so many road victories by teams throughout the playoffs. It seems like home court advantage has been, I don't want to say completely nullified, but it certainly has not had the impact that it had in the past. But I am with you. I'm going to go Dallas in 6. So we're going to agree here. And I think that Luka gets his first title. I think Kyrie sort of cements himself as not the best sidekick of all time, but certainly he's in the discussion for a top 5 sidekick to an NBA superstar that we've had.
If they win the championship, Mike, if they win the championship, we are going to come up with our list of the top 5 sidekicks of all time.
I like it. I like it. There's a couple guys that I have in mind already, but yeah, I think
And
that
then and then
he's
and
going
then
to.
if the and then when the Celtics, if they all, the opposite is the biggest five letdown teams of all time.
Okay. Yeah, well, that would be the same. That would be the same result, the same podcast, right? If Dallas
Yeah,
wins
yeah,
and
yeah,
Boston
yeah, yeah.
loses, without those would be two topics for the same NBA Finals reaction podcast. So,
Yeah.
all right. So we have Mavs in 6. It's going to be a great series. Looking forward to it for sure. We hope you all enjoy the NBA Finals.
And
I know there's
Mike,
been years where we've what?
I was gonna say, are we? I was just gonna. This is the next question. Are we gonna attempt? Are we gonna attempt to react after every game? Are we gonna?
Let's
We're gonna leave the
let's
door open.
tentatively.
We're gonna leave the
We're
door
gonna leave
open,
the
but we're
door
not
open.
gonna
Let's leave.
commit.
Yeah, let's leave the door open that we will. How about this? I'm predicting that we will have several post game pods, but possibly not after every
Yeah,
game. That
and
seems like a
and
reasonable
and and
prediction.
and if we do the post game pods, we may not do a Tuesday episode. Does that sound about
That's
right?
correct.
Like
That's
because
correct. Yeah, that's correct.
because so they play Thursday. I believe the schedule is Thursday, Sunday, Wednesday.
That's right.
So if that's the case, then if we do, maybe we do one Sunday night. If we don't do one Thursday, we do Sunday night talking about games 1 and 2, and then we would wait to do another one
Till
until
Wednesday.
Wednesday. So
Yeah, that seems fair. So let's say this. We will probably do at least a couple games. We may not hit everyone, just depending on what life throws at us here at our respective houses. So we will leave it there. We thank everyone for listening to this episode of the Hoopheads Pod. Enjoy the NBA Finals, and we will be back at some point during the series to talk more about it. So thanks to everyone for listening tonight, and we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks.